Okay.
So welcome everyone to the third Thursday Co-Creators Convergence call. This is, I always have to look at the calendar. It's September 19th, 2019.
9/19/19.
Very good. So I'm Noelle Marshall, and I'm here with my beloved Bob.
Hi, everybody. I'm Bob Warner. Together, Noelle and I call ourselves Light Partners, and we serve with you all and all the light partners of the world to serve our one sacred life. We're so happy you're here, including all of those who are watching this recording later.
Indeed. Bob, why don't you just do a little brief thing about Co-Creators Convergence, and then I will introduce our special guest, Eleanor LeCain.
Yes, wonderful. Exciting evening for us this evening. So for those unfamiliar with us in recording and here this evening, the Co-Creators Convergence is a heart resonance community of uniquely gifted souls dedicated to embodying and amplifying our collective consciousness, thereby co-creating a world that works for everyone. We do this with great love, compassion, and joy, honoring all realms of creation to accelerate the awakening of humanity. We invite everyone to be a part of this community, and there are 4 ways to be a part of this community. First is we have a very active Facebook page. We invite you to join us there and be a part of supporting one another in all of our work in the world. Secondly, to join us on this call, the third Thursday of every month, we have amazing guests, or we talk amongst ourselves because we are also amazing guests. And all of those recordings are on our Facebook page, which is the third way of connecting. On our website, which is a third way of connecting, co-creatorsconvergence.com. We have all of our recordings archived there all the way back to 2014. And so there's a photo gallery and information of our upcoming events. Number 4 way of connecting is being with us in circle in June of next year. Will be our 8th annual Co-Creators Convergence at Sunrise Ranch in Loveland, Colorado. And the event's going to be the 3rd through the 7th in 2020. Of June. I'm sorry. We'd love to have you in the circle with us.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bob.
Sure. Hi, Lori.
Welcome, Lori, and Janet Warfield, Karen. Wonderful. We've got both posts, a little bit in between.
We do.
So I'm going to introduce our dear friend for many years, Eleanor LeCain. And I'm just going to cheat here and read this because I want to get all the wonderful things. I don't want to mess it up. So Eleanor is a speaker, writer, and consultant on building a new America and a new world. She advises candidates and elected officials on policy and strategy. She's been instrumental in electing candidates at the local, state, and federal levels, including, I remember when you were working with Senator Elizabeth Warren. She is now the top issues advisor to presidential candidate Marianne Williamson. Eleanor is the author of Breakthrough Solutions, How to Improve Your Life and Change the World by Building on What Works, with an introduction by Dalai Lama. That's an interesting story. She also wrote The Mayor's Guide to Accelerating Gender Equality. So there's much more about Eleanor here, and it just skipped off the page. But she has a law degree, let's see. Well, we're just going to turn it over to you now, Eleanor. This is how we're going to work it. We only have Eleanor for an hour. Earlier today, she was with Marianne Williamson behind the scenes when she was being interviewed on MSNBC. And there's a lot of exciting information there. But Eleanor, why don't we just kind of chronicle for how you started, how you first met Marianne Williamson, and what your connection is with her.
I'd like to ask the starting question, if I might, because this is an unusual evening for us at in our third Thursday calls. Typically, the Co-Creators Convergence community has not talked about, quote, politics. And because many would describe our community as a spiritual support community. And so it's kind of a no politics zone, if you will. But this is a new time for us. And we're living in a new time. As Barbara Marx Hubbard, our dear aunt or grandmother of conscious co-creation would say, she would say breakdown before breakthrough. And I don't think any of us could not suggest that we are not in a breakdown of systematically across this country and across the world. So our question for ourselves is it not time for those of us that are involved in bringing forth heart-filled co-creation and consciousness to be having the conversations that we're going to be having this evening? So I'd like to lead off, Eleanor, if I might, with a question that invites you to kind of share, if you're talking to a spiritual support group, why should we be talking about what is happening in the United States today, in our culture, in our society, and in the presidential campaign?
That is a wonderful question, Bob. Thank you so much for kicking off with that. I would say, there's millions of people who are spiritual seekers, consciously on a spiritual path, and really kind of looking to bring the higher consciousness into the world right now. And, I consider myself one of them. The thing I would say is that while a lot of people look at government and politics and say that it's very toxic, it's full of ego and greed, there's a lot of corruption. So people who are of high integrity and high consciousness don't want to get tainted by, getting their hands dirty by being involved in government and politics. But I would say a couple of things to that. One is, as you rightly say, this is a very unique time. And this is a time really for all hands on deck. We're at such a point of breakdown right now that it's going to take every person stepping in and doing whatever we can to see if we can help America and the world get through this crisis moment. They talk about crisis as both a danger and an opportunity. The danger is there that the whole political system, right now it's being taken over by an autocratic dictator, not respecting the rule of law, the corruption by the multinational corporations, shifting it, changing the rules so the top 1% owns more than the bottom 90% of Americans. The whole thing is kind of rigged against the regular people. And part of the reason that happened is because so few people do get involved, even to the point of voting. If you look at the voting turnout in 2016, people say, how did Donald Trump get elected? Well, you look at the numbers, it basically a quarter of the people voted for Donald Trump, a quarter of the people plus 3 million voted for Hillary Clinton, and about half the people who were eligible to vote didn't bother to vote. So, if even a few of those people had showed up, we just needed 30,000 people in 3 different states, and we could have kept Trump out of the White House. So Marianne has a great phrase for Trump. She calls him an opportunistic infection. The reason he could get elected is because so many people were disengaged and not voting. So that's just, if we stay disengaged, if half the people stay disengaged, we will continue on the current path, and it's not a pretty picture, particularly at a moment we have an existential crisis with this climate change situation, the global warming, and the dramatic changes that we're having in our weather conditions. We have about 10 years to do that, to get a grip on that situation. So our democracy is at risk. Our very planet is at risk in terms of the climate change. The wealth inequality is so extreme. There are millions of Americans really struggling financially, while a few people have enormous wealth. So I would say those are kind of the top 3 challenges we get. So we all need to get involved right now. And my own experience is that being engaged in politics and government at this time is actually a fantastic spiritual path, because everything we need to grow spiritually, we're going to run into those situations as we engage in government and politics. So I think getting involved in government and politics is a fantastic spiritual path. I think we can all grow faster and go further spiritually precisely by being engaged in government and politics. I've certainly found that for myself, and I think it's true. And those of us who are light workers here to bring in a new world, now's the time to step forward and to get engaged and to bring that light into government and politics. And when we join together and do that, I think we can turn this trauma into a moment of tremendous transformation in a good way. So I invite everyone on the call to join with me, whether or not it's supporting Marianne Williamson for president or whoever you believe is a good person. But register, vote, donate money, give time as a volunteer, run for office yourself. You know, really get into the game, because America needs you now, or America as we know it may not continue.
So thank you very much for that, Eleanor. And spiritual activism. We need to, I feel that's my calling. And in fact, that will probably be in the streets tomorrow for our climate issues.
Not maybe, we will.
We will, of course. But okay, we're gonna just make a couple moments here, take a couple moments to say, if you have a specific question for Eleanor, please put it in the chat, just because we just don't have her for a lot of time. And if you want to ask a question, otherwise Bob and I will carry on a conversation. So we want to hear your voices too. So sometimes it's easier to put it in the chat. The other thing is just what Eleanor said. This is not an endorsement of Marianne Williamson. It's Eleanor's a great friend of ours. We read her book, The Politics of Love, and if you haven't read this book, it's fantastic. And as I confessed to Eleanor earlier, we had a conversation. I said, I was thinking, why am I going to waste any time with Marianne Williamson? Because her chance is so little, and when I read the book and really listened to her, I was going like, oh my God, that's a conversation we need to have in this country. She's really going to the issues, what's underneath the issues, and what the new paradigm really is. But let's just back up a little. I'll do this now, Bob, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Eleanor, would you just tell us how you first got engaged? I mean, you are like the top advisor. You wrote her whole policy book. You're behind the scenes with her in Detroit, today in Georgetown. So you have such a unique perspective. And, we were on the phone the other day, and she says, Noelle, I have to postpone. I'll call you back. Marianne's on the phone, and she wants to know about climate issues. And so I said, oh, yeah, take Marianne's call. I'm flexible. So why don't you tell us about that wonderful, how this all came about?
Yeah, great question. Well, I first got involved, first met Marianne about 25 years ago when I worked with my dear friend Rama Vernon, and we put together the Women of Vision and Action Network, which was a fantastic national global network of spiritually aware women active to help bring in the new world. So our very first conference, actually, now that you mention it, was in Georgetown. We're kind of circling back today, 25 years later. But we had the first Women of Vision and Action, the WOVA conference was in Georgetown. We had over 400 women there, and Marianne spoke, and I spoke, and it was just one of the best gatherings I've ever been to in my life. It was at that moment I said, there's so much energy and excitement here. These are the people, these are the women, this is the energy that we need to bring into the world. So we set up an ongoing network for many, many years. I was the president of the WOVA network, and we ran regional conferences and so forth. Marianne and I heard each other's speeches at that first conference and really hit it off and stayed in touch. Marianne was an advisor to WOVA as I was running the organization. And she and I worked together. She's done different projects over the years. She did a project, the Renaissance Alliance, American Renaissance. I helped her with that. When she was doing the Peace Alliance, I noticed Laura George is on the call with us today, going to be in DC this week, coming week, doing some lobbying for the Peace Alliance. I helped Marianne with that. I helped set up their first Washington, D.C. office and think through strategy and so forth. So when Marianne ran for the House 5 years ago in Los Angeles, she had dinner with me that July ahead of time to tell me she was planning to run for the House. And we agreed that I would be her issues advisor for that. She said, great, I need a tutor. You got to teach me all about economics, teach me about education, teach me about American history, you know, the whole thing. So we started at that time 5 years ago. For about 6 months every week, I would write a briefing paper for her on economics or education or environment and climate. And we'd talk on the phone. She'd read it. We'd talk on the phone. And they're like 5 to 10 page paper. We'd talk on the phone, and she was like such a fast learner, so brilliant, and just would ask the best questions. I go, oh my God, I never thought about that. I'll research that and let you know. So we did that for about 6 months before she ran for the House. And then I went out there that spring. My husband was speaking at Long Beach, California, at a conference there. So I went out for the long weekend with him. So I called Marianne. I said, hey, Marianne, I'll be in the LA area. I'll come up for a day and volunteer in your campaign. So I went up and I spoke with her volunteers, and I spoke with her senior staff. She brought me to a house party at Beverly Hills. I gave her some ideas on strategy for how to win. And she called me the next day and she said, Eleanor, you have to be my campaign manager. And I said, Marianne, I don't know Los Angeles. I don't know the players. I don't know the geography. You've been in the campaign already 5 months. So I don't think that's a good idea. And she said, go talk to God. So I talked to God, and actually, much to my amazement, God said, do this. You know, this woman is putting herself on the line to stand up for what we all believe in, and you need to support her. You can help her, so you need to help her. So I called her back and said, God said yes, and off we went. So I became her campaign manager at the end of that House campaign. So as she was thinking about running for president, she called me. We had lunch in Washington, D.C., and talked about it. And she again hired me as her issues advisor. And I actually helped her on that book. I helped her with that, doing research and thinking through the conceptualization and the information and facts and perspective that are reflected in that book. And I was really deeply honored when she did the acknowledgments. The first one she acknowledged was her father, who was the biggest influence on her life. And the very next person was me. And I was so deeply grateful. And I can't tell you how grateful I am for the opportunity to work with Marianne. She's such a bright light, such high consciousness, such brilliance, and such fearlessness and dedication to helping to, bring a spiritually informed, grounded, new paradigm perspective into the discussion, into American politics and government at a time that we desperately need it. And I love her. I love working with her. I love the opportunity to take everything that I know about policy and ideas and perspectives and programs and bring it to her. And she does her magic, weaving it into the most fascinating and charismatic speeches and presentations you can imagine. So it's been the best job of my whole life. I'm really loving it.
Wow, thank you. And for those who haven't read this, the subtitle is A Handbook for the New American Revolution. I was sitting at breakfast one morning at Sunrise Ranch with my Bernie 2016 t-shirt on, and one of the other ranchers said, you got to read this book. And I did, we did, we've passed it to others, we've got 2 copies. It reframes everything. And so this whole subject of the politics of love, this whole subject of this time that we're in and our responsibility to step forward in sacred activism is what this is about. Yes, it confronts the root of each of the major issues, the root of the issues, and then goes forward from that. So, Noelle, you got another question?
Well, this is from
Janet.
Dr. Janet Smith-Warfield.
Yeah.
Hey, Janet.
Hi,
down
Janet.
there in Sarasota. She says, what is Marianne's strategy? Simply to bring an important conversation in front of the American public? She has no political experience. Can she really win?
That's a great question, and I've actually heard that. I'm so happy you asked that. Who asked that question? Anyway, thanks for asking that, because that is what most people think. So I appreciate you bringing it to the fore. I would say Marianne's in this race to win it. And along the way, she's bringing in these new perspectives. She's starting a new conversation. She's bringing a real depth to it about looking at root causes, not just symptoms. Anybody who watched any of the debates has seen that. One of my favorite ones was when in the first debate, they were arguing on stage about healthcare, and they were saying, well, I'm for Medicare for all. The other was like, well, I'm for public option, let people opt into Medicare. So this went on for about a half an hour, and then the moderator finally called on Marianne, and she said, well, yes, I think we need to make Medicare available to everyone, and we need to look at the root causes. Why are so many people getting sick? 1 out of every 2 Americans is chronically ill with some serious illness like diabetes or cancer or heart disease. So, what's going on there? We got to look at the toxins in our environment, the quality of the food that we're eating, and we need to be really looking upstream. How do we create a better environment with less toxins so fewer people are getting sick and need the health care like that? So she is raising in very short time. You get your 60 seconds on the debate stage, but she used the time so effectively. She did it again when we were talking about the situation with Trump building the wall and keeping out the immigrants trying to get in from Central America. And she said, well, no, we don't want that wall, but we need to protect our borders. But let's look at the deeper issue here. Why are so many people wanting to leave their homes and come to the United States? And let's go El Salvador, other countries, and look at how do we help people stay where they are. Let's do some economic development, some good education, opportunity for people to have jobs or start businesses in their own homes so they won't feel the need to be coming up to the United States. So I love that she's willing to look at those root causes. And I actually think we need a president who understands that. I think Marianne Williamson is the first 21st century candidate that we've ever had. She's the first one that comes with a fully holistic view of what's going on, how the different pieces interact. A lot of political people are kind of segmented. They think about, well, this is education, this is healthcare, and they're kind of taught to think in silos. Marianne thinks about it all very holistically. And I've talked to a lot of people. They say to me, well, Marianne's really great. I love what she says, and she's my favorite candidate, but she doesn't have a prayer to win, so I'm going to vote for someone else. If every person who said that voted for Marianne, she'd be in the top tier right now. And we have a saying in politics that in the primary, you should vote your heart, and in the final, you should vote your head. But when you've got a primary, absolutely you need to vote for the person you believe would do the best job for the country. And the fact that, as you point out in your question, she does not have experience in government right now, that's totally fine with me. That actually may be a plus. I think, we need an outsider coming in with a fresh perspective, fresh energy, someone who's not beholden to the donors that are there, and they're there for a lot of the Democrats as well as the Republicans, beholden to the corporate donors and the PAC money and all the rest of it. She doesn't owe anybody anything. She's coming in fresh. She's coming in free. She's coming in clean. She can do exactly what she believes the country needs. So I would encourage people, if you really think that you would like her perspective and her presence in the White House to help guide the country through our dark times, I encourage you, when pollsters call, say she's your number one choice, send her some money, Marianne2020.com. Volunteer in your state, go to Iowa or New Hampshire, whatever you can do to help her. If you believe she's the right person, then we all need to get behind who we think is the best person to run. And I actually think she has a chance to win if we can get through some of the media sieves, who, some of the media has been very hostile in terms of ridiculing her. Not all of it, and some of it's been actually really good, but some has been, dismissive and ridiculing her. But when I look into why are they doing that, I think it's the fact that she's the only one who's really out there very upfront about her spiritual beliefs, and that she is guided spiritually to run and to do what she does. And there's a lot of anti-spiritual feeling among the left and among the media. And I think she's been really, not that she's a victim, but she's been subject to kind of a scrutiny and a ridicule that she would not have had if she has not been talking so upfront about her spiritual beliefs and her spiritual motivations. So I think those of us who understand that she's actually, we're all on a sacred journey, and this is a sacred time in our country and our world. And we want those beings of light who are in it for the dedication to making a better world for everyone. Those are the people we need to step on and support, because they will face that attack and that ridicule. And we need to be there to support them, to help them through. If enough of us show up, she can win.
Janet, do you have any follow-up question? I unmuted you to see if you had anything follow-up, but
not really. Other than I'll just mention, I'm very active politically. I'm also a retired attorney. I have heard occasional people whose analysis of the political situation I really respect make comments like, I think Marianne is extremely dangerous. I personally don't believe that, but this is some of the commentary that I have heard. Specifically, I don't know whether you're familiar with Elizabeth Cronice McLaughlin's.
No.
She does quite a good job. She's a former prosecutor herself, so she analyzes the whole political situation from a legal perspective and from the basis of her own experience prosecuting cases in the DC Circuit in the Eastern District of Virginia and the Southern District of New York. I think she's prosecuted cases in all three jurisdictions. So I was surprised to hear her say that. I usually respect what she has to say, but she made a comment about Marianne.
Well, I'm going to jump in here and suggest that, Janet, that you have Eleanor LeCain on your Dancing with Words, Dancing with Wisdom radio show. You got to get more words out there, girl.
That's right.
Go introduce us.
Okay.
We'll do that.
We'll do that. Consider yourself introduced, but we'll make it formal.
I am like snowed right now. I'm in tears.
Okay. Well, you've got a little bit more time. So.
Yes, unfortunately, the presidential campaign cycle lasts 4 years now, not just 2 years. So there's time.
Yeah.
Well, I think it may depend on what you consider dangerous, and in some ways, I mean, if you're a fossil fuel company, she's a dangerous woman, because she's not going to be for keeping the fossil fuel subsidies at $26 billion a year. If you're with Big Pharma, she's a dangerous woman, because she's challenging, some of the profit greedy, what they're doing, getting people hooked on these OxyContin medicines in order to reap higher profits, charging Americans 3 to 16 times for these medicines that these companies are charging in other countries, even though we, the taxpayers, have paid for the development of those drugs. So if you're one of those, in one of those situations, Marianne's a dangerous woman. But I think, for the rest of us, I think she's a real light worker, and she's come in to really have a dramatic change, not incremental, not reform. She is for dramatic, big-time structural transformation. And that's what I believe we need, and I'm excited about it. I actually had thought I knew it would come sometime, and this major transformation. I was hoping I'd live long enough to be here when that moment happened. And I think we're at that moment now. And in some ways, Trump is a gift to all of us because he's putting it right in our face of which way do we want to go. And if we really care about America, care about the rule of law, care about a country that works for everyone, care about democracy, we need to step up now and take action to defend our country, to defend the rule of law, and to make the changes we need to make the country work for everyone and not just the top 1%. Mm-hmm. And by the way, speaking of people saying things, I've been surprised at some of the commentators who have commented favorably for Marianne. Some Republicans in the New York Times, David Brooks, after the second debate, said, I think Marianne Williamson is the only one who can beat Trump. And by the way, there was a tweet during the debate. None of you saw it. We saw it in the green room, that the tweet was from Donald Trump Jr. saying, I think Marianne's the biggest threat to my father's reelection. Wow. The Democrats would vote for her, we're in big trouble. So it's been interesting to me. And then Taffy at the New York Times did that beautiful profile last week in the Sunday New York Times Magazine. And she actually, in the magazine profile, calls out the fellow reporters as ridiculing Marianne unnecessarily, and that they're kind of taking cheap shots at her. But if you actually look at who she is and what she stands for, that this is a woman of great vision and of great depth. And she brings a lot of what America needs right now. And Taffy, the New York Times reporter, followed Marianne around for 4 months before she filed that story. So I think she gets support in surprising places. And I actually think Marianne could get some Trump supporters to vote for her. So I think she has tremendous potential. And also note, in the US Constitution, when it says who can run for president, the only qualifications you need really are you're born in the United States and you're 35 years or older. The framers of the Constitution, our founding fathers, never said you had to have experience in government, you had to have been a governor, you had to have been a member of Congress. They left it for each generation to figure out, this is the person we need to lead us in this moment. So it's open to any American to run. And I think I feel blessed really that Marianne has been willing to take on. It's a very difficult thing she's doing. I see her working, 4 a.m. up to midnight later, because I've been 2 nights ago, I didn't have any sleep whatsoever. She and I are emailing there between 12 and 2 a.m. around the climate action plan. Then she's on a plane at 4 o'clock this morning from New York to DC to speak at Georgetown at the MSNBC Climate Town Hall. So I'm with her some of the way. She's doing it all day, every day. And I think it's great. I'm thrilled she's willing to, and I'm thrilled I have a chance to support her. And I think she's getting some support in unusual quarters.
Interesting. We don't have any more questions in the chat, but if anybody would like to raise their hand and make a comment on anything that Eleanor shared so far, just unmute yourself and feel free to interact with Eleanor. And thank you for joining us, Polly. We got your nice note today. Thank you very much. And Amy, good to see you again. So anyone have anything they'd like to raise? Or Amy would. Okay. Amy, I'm going to unmute you. Go ahead.
No, I'm listening. I don't have a question. This is very enlightening.
Very good.
My circles are of the same question that Janet brought up, that Marianne may not get a chance, but your perspective is very interesting. So now we, yeah.
And one of Eleanor's recent emails to me, she also said, well, let's see, the question was, can she win? So the answer might be, do you believe in miracles? Is this the time? Is this the
Right.
time?
And I do believe in miracles. And I've also seen people responding to her. I've been up in New Hampshire. I haven't been to Iowa, but I've been up in New Hampshire. I'm actually very, very close friends with the state director in New Hampshire, is Paul Hodes, a former member of Congress, a very serious guy. He, by the way, was the first member of Congress to endorse Barack Obama for president. So he's endorsed Marianne, and he's working with her in New Hampshire. And the response she's getting when she's in front of people is really good. And even when she came out of the box, she was the first one to talk about reparations as something that was, owed to African Americans. And when she first raised it, it's not something I push with her. In fact, I told her, I said, if you do this, you're going to have a big blowback. People are going to go, it's going to be seen as a handout, making African Americans special. They're getting something whites aren't. You're going to really lose a lot of white support of people who think not another handout to the blacks. And she said, Eleanor, it's the right thing to do. And we actually, she said, come at me about it. Come at me with all your objections. And I did, very strongly. And she answered them all. And she said, look, the African Americans were enslaved for 150 years. Then we had the Civil War. And in Reconstruction, we had 100 years of Jim Crow, where they were essentially kind of enslaved in all but name. They were promised after the Civil War to get 40 acres and a mule, never really given that. And if you think about all the wages they would have earned had they been paid when they were slaves or working in the fields during Jim Crow, and the fact they got robbed and cheated out of their 40 acres and a mule, like who ended up with those acres anyway? And you put that all together and you think about, oh my God, that's over like a 250-year period. Then this is not, this is a debt that's owed. This is not like a payoff for anybody. This is like, this money should have been paid a long time ago, so we'll pay it now. She actually persuaded me that it was the right thing to do. And she's saying this everywhere she goes, including the state of New Hampshire, as I'm sure many of you know, is a very white state. I think it's like 86%, 88% white. And she gets up and speaks about reparations, and she has people nodding their heads and building support. And not just that, but everything else, dealing with the opioid crisis. And I talked to her early on. She brought me out to Los Angeles when we were working on the book. This is like a year ago now. She brought me out to LA to work with her on the Politics of Love book. And when we were out there, I said, look, Marianne, said, your career has been for 35 years to help people who are going through trauma and to actually turn that into something positive in their lives. So she's helped a lot of people going through a rough divorce, people who are dealing with drug addiction or alcoholism, people who used to be very, doing very well career-wise, and they lose their job and really fall down. So she's helped, and these people all come up to her when I've been with her many, many times, thousands of people who personally come up to her and say, thank you, Marianne, you've saved my life, or you saved my father's life, or you saved my brother's life. And they tell the story, person after person, time after time. I said, you've done this. You've essentially helped individuals go from trauma to transformation for 35 years. That's what the country needs right now. The country is traumatized. We're traumatized because of Trump and what's been going on in the White House for 2 years and the crazy campaign in 2016. We're traumatized because we're facing really cataclysmic threat from this climate change situation is extremely serious. I mean, we could face environmental systems breakdown with the oceans and the floods and the hurricanes, all the rest of it, the ability to grow food, change, all of that. We're traumatized because of the income inequality we have, where instead of trickle down, which is basically crumbs off the table for the middle class and lower income people, trickle down is, it's been vacuum up with the resources, or 90% of the resources going to the top 1%. So we're traumatized by all of that. And a lot of people struggling financially who should be solid middle class. A lot of class slippage. People who used to be middle class now are really struggling. So we've got all this trauma. So this is what we need right now in the United States. We need to move from trauma to transformation. You have helped individuals move from trauma to transformation for 35 years through your speaking and your writing and your consoling and consulting with people. Now we need you on the national stage to help America go from trauma to transformation. And what are we as a country, but a group of individuals, all with our hearts and souls, all carrying the burdens and challenges and hopes and dreams. We need someone up there speaking for us and helping the government be directed in such a way that helps all of us learn and grow and thrive, instead of the government being a handmaiden for the corporations so they can bring in ever more wealth. Let's have the government be something that sets the rules of the road and the tax and finance in such a way to help people get a good education, get a good job, have a quality health care, have affordable medicines, be able to retire in dignity as seniors. We can do all of that. We're the richest country in the world. So that's why I recommended to Marianne her theme be from trauma to transformation. And she's really kind of been talking a lot about that on the trail. And I think that's a really good thing. And it is what America needs right now.
Thank you, Eleanor. This chapter in the book, Race and Repentance, out of many one, this chapter just stabbed me in the heart, and how has this ever been done before? Yeah, the Germans did it after the war when they made reparations to Jewish organizations after World War II.
They're still doing it.
President Reagan, a Republican, did the Civil Liberties Act and compensated more than 100,000 people of Japanese descent for what our government, quote, our government did to those human beings here on our own soil. And so again, I really recommend a read of the book, as Eleanor said, no matter who you're voting for. Who else would like to have conversation with Eleanor?
I thought, Laurie, I'm going to unmute you.
Yeah, great.
Can I unmute you, or are you going to mute yourself?
Unmuted. Okay. Hey, what comes to mind to me is what happened to Bernie Sanders in the last 2016 election, which was internal to the Democratic Party. And what Michael Moore showed is there were 5 states that had majority for Bernie supporters, but when it came to the convention, they were called for Hillary, and they were referring to something like superdelegates. And even beyond that, there was systematic bias within the Democratic National Committee against Bernie, and that came out in the leak of the DNC emails. So I just wanted to bring that up in this context.
Yeah, no, I'm concerned about what happened with Bernie by the DNC in the 2016 election. But I will say, not to defend it, but the rules at the time were to have a supermajority that you referred to was known from the beginning to be a group of people who have a long time experience in the Democratic Party, whether they be state leaders or elected officials, that would have a vote along with the primary votes. Remember, before, years ago, there were no primaries. Basically, the leaders of the Democratic Party or the Republican Party got in a room and they picked who the candidate would be and they ran them. Then it became more democratic and we had the primaries, but along with the votes of the citizens in the primaries, both parties have a version of a supermajority, people who are long time engaged, because the hope was that people who've been around for a while would not be fooled by a con artist or an egotist or someone who is a real dangerous character. If such a person did catch fire, that that fire could be put out by the supermajority. And in fact, in some ways, you wish the Republican Party had had more of a supermajority to keep Donald Trump off of being the nominee in the 2016 election, because a lot of Republicans knew how dangerous he was. And so it's not all bad to have that kind of check and balance there in the party. But yeah, there was definitely a bias in the DNC by the head of the party, was a woman from Florida, a woman congresswoman, and she was definitely pro-Hillary and kind of tilted in Hillary's favor. But the other thing I would say, we know now, what we didn't know in the 2016 election, that the Russians were very involved in many ways in that election. I mean, one of the things was they inflamed on the social media the Bernie versus Hillary social media exchanges, and were putting out some phony information to inflame the tensions there. And by the way, the Russians also supported the Green Party. I don't know if people here have seen the pictures of Jill Stein, who was the presidential candidate for the Green Party in 2016, at dinner with Vladimir Putin in Moscow. But she was definitely the Republicans supporting her as well. And for some reason, it hasn't been reported, but if the vote, even the majority of the votes that went to Jill Stein had gone to the Democratic candidate Hillary Clinton in 2016, Hillary would be the president, because that was only about 30,000 votes in 3 states, something like that. And the number of votes for Jill Stein was well over that. Now, when that happened in the year 2000, Ralph Nader was the third party candidate, presidential candidate for the Green Party, and he became vilified by a lot of people because the votes for Ralph Nader were enough to elect George Bush and to keep Al Gore out. So Ralph Nader he's kind of a branded man because of that disruption he caused. But somehow Jill Stein, it was just never part of the conversation. But part of that is, again, the more people that turn out, the harder it is for any party or any particular interest group to influence it. The more people who vote, the less likely it's going to be steered one way or another by an outside force.
And a broken system.
Right.
If I can just follow up for a second.
Sure.
Okay. Well, as coincidence would have it, last week I met someone, Matthew Bennett, at an event called the New Economy. And we had dinner, and he told me that he founded the Green Party, but he thought that it had been infiltrated, and so he's no longer part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I actually, yes, I was at the very first meeting of the Greens in the United States in the 1980s. And I know a lot of those people well. And I like a lot about the Green politics. Petra Kelly was a friend of mine who helped found the Green Party in Germany, which has done fantastic work. And I actually visited her in Germany. She visited me in the United States. So I have a strong support for the ecological awareness and doing what it takes to protect our Mother Earth. I mean, really, what are we thinking? We're polluting our land, our air, our water. So we need to really put our ecology, our planet, at the core of all that we're doing here. So yeah, I think it has been infiltrated, and good for him for leaving because of it. And by the way, that circles us back to kind of the initial question that Bob was asking about spiritually, where people even having a conversation about politics. It's like this image came to me the other day. It's great to sit and meditate and to be centered and to be loving and to be compassionate. And I try to do that every day, given the intensity of what I'm dealing with every day. It's a wonderful thing. But at the same time, if you're there and then you're doing your meditation and someone's beating up your mother, you don't stand there and go, oh, well, I feel compassion for the predator who's beating up my mother, and he doesn't know any better, and forgive him. And no, if someone's beating up your mother, you get up out of meditation and you go and stop the person from beating up your mother. Well, right now we have a lot of activities that are beating up our Mother Earth. The pollution that's coming out from the fossil fuels and the toxins being emitted, they're, beating up our mother. We need to stand up. Yes, meditate, but stand up and stop the perpetrators, stop the violence against the earth and the animals that's happening. And that's our job right now. And that, to me, it's like, it's a part of the spiritual calling, is to be responsive to the violence and of the suffering and to the darkness that's out there. That's our job as light workers. Stay centered, be in the light, and move into the darkness and move into those spheres, stop the violence and bring the light and bring the changes that we need that can inspire and guide people through a dark time into what I think is going to be a golden age for the United States and for the world, if we can get through this dark tunnel, which I know we can if enough people stand up.
Well, Eleanor, I have a question related to the darkness. There is so much corruption on so many levels in our government. It's not being addressed in any of the debates.
True.
It seems like we get 7 minutes of climate here and some of the other existential and issues, but that one doesn't seem to have gotten any airtime. And I'm just wondering what your comment might be about that. About there's HR 1, the Anti-Corruption Act that Sarbanes brought, and it's probably just gonna die of old age there. But that's something that has to be addressed. And is the DNC part of it, the RNC part of it? Yeah. So.
No, exactly right. Right on beam as usual, Noel. But Marianne has talked a lot about corruption, by the way, and including today at Georgetown at the MSNBC Climate Town Hall. And she was talking about the plans that we have, which it's a little bit funny for me because I'm the one making plans and the policy. But you'll say, well, plans are great, but unless we mobilize the people, the plans aren't going to mean anything. So, and I agree with her. And so she says there's so much corruption there. Unless we mobilize the American people behind a vision of a different way of doing things, whether it be climate change or wealth inequality or our democracy itself, then none of it's going to matter. So you need to have the vision and the plan, but you need to inspire enough people to get motivated to vote and to put wheel to the shoulder and to make the needed changes. So Marianne's very aware of the corruption. It's actually her number one issue. It's what she ran on for the House 5 years ago in LA for the House seat. And she's the most articulate spokesperson I know for dealing with getting the money out of politics. And the HR 1 that you refer to, by the way, is like when the Democrats took back the House, Nancy Pelosi was elected Speaker of the House again. She's done a fantastic job over the past 2 years, passing really great legislation. And her very first bill was HR 1. That's why it's got the number 1, House Resolution 1. It's all about democracy reform. There's tremendous, great stuff in there about getting money out of politics and, overturning Citizens United and all really good things. And she's passed that and she's passed healthcare legislation. She's passed education legislation. She's passed a lot of great bills. They're all going over to the Senate and dying. Why? Because the Republicans have majority control in the Senate. The Senate Majority Leader is Mitch McConnell from Texas, and they call it the graveyard over there. The House passes all these great bills, it goes over to the Senate, and it dies.
Right.
So if not only do we need to elect a new president in 2020, we need to elect some new Democratic members of the Senate to see if the Democrats can get a majority in the Senate and get Mitch McConnell out of there. There's a great woman running against him for the Senate in
Amy
Kentucky, in McGrath. I think she's a relative of mine because my grandmother's name was McGrath.
Go to your 23andMe.
It's all these Irish women. It's like the Celtic warriors are surfacing at this moment.
Celtic women.
There you go.
Celtic women on the rise.
Wow, thank you. Well, we'll when we get our early invitation to the Unrig the System Summit for next year, the third annual, since we were with you down there in Nashville this year. When we get our invitation that they've announced the next one, let's be sure and get Marianne to the Unrig Summit that's sponsored by Represent Us.
Yeah. Anyone else have something to say?
Yeah.
To chat with Eleanor? Okay, we're going back over here to Janet. I'll unmute you. You go.
I was just going to comment that taking a firm stand, it's really a firm stand for what the Buddhists would call right action, Christians would call ethics and morals. You don't sit there with your hands folded praying when somebody is raping your daughter or bombing your family or allowing climate change to inundate your home. You don't sit there and do nothing. You do whatever you can.
Absolutely.
That's exactly right. And that's what's going on now. We need to, I so agree with everything you're saying. And that's why, to me, it's the spiritually aware place to be is in government and politics right now, because of the corruption, because of the darkness that's there, that those of us who are spiritually aware and on that path to get engaged and to, step. And the thing about it, it's like, you think about it, when you're in this giant room that's full of darkness, all it takes is one candle and that light can light up the whole room. So, and that's what each of us as light workers can be, that light wherever we go. And given the line of work I do as policy and strategist for people courageous enough to run for office, that I did take note at the beginning when we were looking, talking to folks about where everyone is from. Quite a number of folks on this call are living in swing states. We got Virginia, North Carolina, Florida, Colorado, maybe more. Every one of those states, I'm very jealous of you all because your vote really matters. Those states are not a given which way they're going to go. And I live here in Washington, D.C. I don't have anyone voting for me in the U.S. House or the U.S. Senate. I can vote for president, but it's kind of, there's so many Democrats here, it doesn't matter. We all know the Democrat's going to win. But I'm very jealous of you all living in the swing states. Your vote is so important, and your voice is so important, particularly, really everywhere, but particularly in those swing states. So I appreciate all any of you can do there in terms of being registered and voting, encouraging your friends and neighbors to register and vote, getting involved in any way you can. You can make a huge difference. And I've been in many, many campaigns over the years, more than I like to count. I actually did help elect Elizabeth Warren to the U.S. Senate back in 2012, back in my home state of Massachusetts. And people are saying, well, why you worked for Elizabeth Warren? Why are you with Marianne Williamson now? And I guess, obviously Elizabeth Warren has a better chance of winning. So it's because Marianne Williamson is carrying the 21st century holistic, spirit-guided message that we need to go from trauma to transformation right now. And I love Elizabeth Warren. If she is the nominee, I will happily work for her or any of the other Democrats who are nominated. I think it's that important. We just all have to help whoever it is. So, but yeah, I encourage everybody, get involved. And by the way, you meet some of the most amazing, fun, interesting people when you get in the game of politics and get into elections. And there's so many good people now turning up that have never been involved before. So you'll have a lot of good company, and I think you'll have a lot of fun. And it's where the action is. It's the place to be.
Mhm. Awesome. So what can the regular people do to transform government? I mean, they can vote, they can get people out. I went on Marianne Williamson's website the other day, marianne2020.com, got my t-shirt, and she's selling for $1 a home,
A watch party and a
like a house party
house party
kit, 26 pages, great stuff. And also for another $1, you can download what you can do on social media for Marianne, should she be your person of choice. She certainly is mine, because I'm just going to vote my values, as you said. Vote your heart in the primary. And what disturbs me a little bit, though, is that when there are some of these online who are you going to vote for sort of things, Marianne's name isn't on it.
Right. And that, by the way, was true not just of the online polls. That was true of some of the polls in the field.
So how is she supposed to get the critical amount of support, visibility to be on the debate floor? And will she make any of the other debates coming up? Are there any more of the DNC debates, or because she wasn't on the last one, she can't be on anymore?
She could get on the next ones. They're going to have a debate every month now in the Democratic Party. But
be busy.
she was such a magnificent presence in the first two debates, and brought such fresh perspective in the limited time she had. I think she had 5 minutes out of 2.5 hours. But we missed her on the third one. She flew me to Los Angeles last week so I could be with her and watch the debate. And she did a media event afterward and spoke. And she wanted me there. If they had asked me that question, what would I answer? And I said, I'm happy to help you do that. And no matter what they say on the stage, this is a unique opportunity for you, since you're not on this third debate stage, to say what needs to be talked about that they're not saying on that stage. This issue about the corruption you're talking about, including in the Democratic Party. So that's what I did out with her in LA last week, and she gave a fantastic speech after the debate. I mean, the debate, I love this stuff, and I was put to sleep. It was so damn boring. It was like a real snoozer. It's like, oh my God, we're all missing Marianne. She brought that spark and pizzazz, and you never knew what she was going to say. But it would
Amen on that. All good, though.
We missed her presence, her voice, her values, her vision in that debate. If she gets, she needs 4 polls where she scores 2% or higher, and she needs 160,000 individual donors to get into the next debate. She's got the 160,000 individual donors, which, by the way, quite a number of the governors and members of Congress never hit that, but she did. But the polls is harder. There's not so many polls. And they sometimes don't include her name on it. So I think she's got 2 out of the 4. So if in the next 2 weeks some polls come out where she's hits the 2%, she'll be in the 4th debate in October. So there's still a chance she could rise. And her strategy right now, someone asked earlier about that, keep alive. If she, as long as the money keeps in, she'll keep in, keep going and raising her voice. And she's building. She's got a good team in Iowa and New Hampshire, South Carolina, and Nevada. She's got, if she can stay alive till the voters get a chance to vote, which is next year, early January and February, get the first primary and the first caucus. If she can stay in till then let the voters have their voice, and not the Democratic Party or the media or anybody else. Let the voters select who they want to be in this race.
Yeah. It's part of I just get so discouraged when I see polls this and polls that. One of the speakers at Unrigged the first year was a woman, along with the Harvard professor, that did a did a very extensive study on what she calls the political industrial complex. And, you know, it's polls, it's media, it's the two national parties, and it's all of that. And it just drives me mad to see polls. And with social media, you don't know whose poll was it, and you know, you don't know that it wasn't made up by a couple of Russian guys sitting at the kitchen table, and you know, who's ahead and who's not, whatever. So we have to wish for the best for that opportunity to be there in the primaries and in the caucuses, as you say.
I'm gonna let Janet jump in here. Thanks, Bob.
Yeah.
I just want to comment. I thought that was a very smart procedural tactic for Marianne to do that broadcast right after the Democratic debate where she was not included. She had a whole, I forget how long it was, but a whole pile of time by herself just to speak her own truth and comment on what was said or wasn't said. So I thought that was really a smart move.
It's kind of a time we have now to do that, where we couldn't do that a number of years ago. If you're not on the national network, you know, too bad, it's too late. But now, even realizing some people watched 3 hours of Snooze Fest, they weren't particularly alert enough to watch another hour of Marianne, but it's all recorded. We can watch it the next day, and you know, and share it the next day, and that sort of thing. So these are new times as to how this is happening.
Can I just share with you one experience we had? We were invited to a watch party by the Democratic Socialists of America's local chapter in Fort Collins, and was in a bar upstairs and was well attended, and it was the second debate, so Marianne was in it. So when Bernie came out, of course the place, yeah, Bernie. When Marianne came out, it was like, yay, Marianne. I was going like, what?
They didn't cheer for anybody else except Bernie and Marianne. And when she spoke, they cheered. It was quite interesting.
That's really interesting.
It is.
Well, you know, it's funny you say that, because I've been with her sometimes at CNN when she did the CNN town hall, which, by the way, if you haven't seen that CNN town hall with Marianne, she was on fire, just fantastic. And I was sitting right there in the front row with her. Sometimes the broadcast stations themselves, or the higher up people, kind of are the ones who ridicule her or marginalize her. But if you're on the ground, you're talking with the women who are connecting people, the doing the mic and the camera guy, the like 20s and 30s something, they're all there behind the scenes wanting a selfie with Marianne.
Yeah, I wondered what her appeal is to the young, to the generation, whatever it is.
Well, you should have seen them at Georgetown today. The students were all lined up after she spoke, like the whole hallway. All these young people came out and they wanted to shake her hand, have a picture, talk to her. She really she was speaking their language on this climate change. She gets that this is serious. They know how serious it is. It's the young ones leading the charge. It's Greta, this 16-year-old woman from Sweden, who started this climate strike that's going to be tomorrow. You know, she started that because she would stop going to school in Sweden on Fridays and go down to the Swedish parliament and have a sign out there saying, do something about climate change. And she did it every Friday through the winter, through the cold and snow in Sweden. And, you know, other students started joining her, and they started doing it other parts of Sweden, then through Scandinavia, then it went through Europe. It's now become a global movement. And this strike that's happening tomorrow, led by the students, is going to be in over 150 countries. And to their credit, the students are saying, you adults can join too, but you know, you've got to commit to taking action here. It's very inspiring, actually. I was talking to Marianne about it today, and she ended up, I said, and I played her Greta's speech at the United Nations a few days ago. I played it for Marianne in the limo ride over to Georgetown today. So Marianne gets up on the stage and she says, I want to be a grown-up Greta.
That's awesome.
That's wild.
That's awesome.
Well, I know it's been a very long day for you, Eleanor. You say you've been up since 4:30 Eastern time. Now it's 9:30.
Right.
9:45 Eastern time.
Run a little over here.
And we really appreciate the time with you. We know you need to get a couple hours sleep so you can get back out in the streets tomorrow with the strike. And if anybody's not familiar with it, the global climate strike, just look that up on Google and you'll find out all the countries and the literally thousands of places where students will be striking tomorrow, and we will be standing right behind them. And a number of us from the ranch are going over to Fort Collins, and in Fort Collins they're actually doing it next Friday as well. So
Right.
anything else before we wrap up, hon?
Yeah,
No, I'm just going to unmute everyone if everyone wants to say. I've been trying to unmute
Yeah.
all.
There you
well,
go.
one last thing just before I go to say is that I appreciate anything any of you can do to help. Marianne2020.com. That if you feel so moved, that would be awesome. Or whoever your candidate of choice is, whether that be president or Senate or House or wherever, just please get involved. America needs you now. And if there's no candidate you feel represents your views, I encourage you to get involved in a group called Indivisible, which is the best group organizing for change that I know that's out there, and they're in every congressional district. So go to indivisible.com. But whatever it is, a candidate or indivisible, America needs you now. We need you. I'd appreciate your help. We need wind under the wings. We need every American, all hands on deck. And I invite your participation, your love, your creativity, your ideas, your imagination, and keep hope alive. We are at an incredible turning point in America and the world. And I am convinced we're going to make it through this dark tunnel to an incredible golden age on the other side. It's going to be so awesome. So join with me in holding that hope and taking action. And I'm sending love to every one of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
so much,
Eleanor. Thank you
Eleanor.
for your time.
Thanks, Eleanor. Thanks for all you're doing.
Thank you.
When's Eleanor going to run for office?
Next round. Next round.
Well, we don't know who's the vice president.
Yes, we do.
There we go.
Thanks, everybody.
Secretary of State.
Bye-bye.
Best to John. Get some sleep.
Thank
Night, everybody.
you.